The smartest move you made on your SUV is quietly running up a bill you've never seen. You paid it off, and that's exactly when your real risk started. It's not the vehicle, it's the calendar. Somewhere close to the 5-year mark, around 60,000 miles, depending on the brand, factory powertrain coverage runs out, and that single date changes more about your finances than anything mechanical ever will. Nothing under the hood changes that day. The paperwork does. Before that date, a transmission failure is a phone call to the dealership and somebody else pays for it. After that date, the exact same failure is a bill with your name on it. The car hasn't aged a single day between those two moments. Your exposure just multiplied. They think the warranty protected the car. It protected their wallet. This hits the same way whether the vehicle was financed or paid for in cash on day one. The warranty doesn't care how it was bought. It only cares how old it is and how many miles are on it, which means even an owner who never carried a loan walks straight into the same cliff without seeing it coming. If you want the actual math behind car ownership, instead of the marketing fluff, hit subscribe because this is exactly where most ownership advice quietly stops being useful. People throw themselves a small celebration the day they make that final payment, and the timing is almost backwards. The loan disappears. The monthly outflow drops to gas and insurance, and it feels like the financial story is over. Depreciation really is slowing down at that point, the one piece of good news in the whole picture, and the only piece most people ever track. Meanwhile, two other numbers move the opposite direction, and almost nobody puts them on the same chart as the one they're celebrating. The loan disappeared. The risk didn't. A modern compact SUV isn't the same kind of machine that earned that old drive it till it dies advice. The dashboard isn't a stereo and a few gauges anymore. It's a touchscreen that also runs the climate control. And when that screen cracks or freezes, you're not just losing music, you're losing the ability to adjust the air conditioning. Replacing one of those integrated displays can run past $1,000, which is close to what most families spend on a long weekend trip. Gone for a part that used to be a $20 knob. That's just the dashboard. The bumper's worse. Behind the front bumper sits a radar module feeding adaptive cruise, plus separate sensors handling blind spot warnings and forward collision alerts. None of that gets repaired in the traditional sense. It gets replaced, then calibrated, and that calibration step alone often runs $300 to $600, more than a month of car insurance, before the part itself is even paid for. A bumper scrape that used to cost a few $100s to buff out can now total more than a full transmission overhaul cost a generation ago. Same fender, different invoice. The bumper isn't just plastic anymore. It's plastic wired to a brain, and insurers price it accordingly. The engine tells a similar story from a different angle. A lot of these crossovers run small turbocharged 4-cylinders specifically to post strong fuel economy numbers on the window sticker, and that turbo earns its keep by working harder than a bigger, simpler engine ever had to. It might save a driver a few $100s a year at the pump. A single turbo failure can erase 3 or 4 years of those exact fuel savings in one shop visit, on top of whatever the repair itself costs to begin with. The same technology that saved money on day one can cost it back with interest by year 6. That's where the math changes. One number rarely makes it into these conversations, and it explains why compact crossovers get hit hardest. CVTs and the newer multi-speed automatics carry more electronic control modules than the transmissions they replaced, so a full replacement can run close to $4,000 at a dealership, roughly 2 years of car insurance for the average household. An extended warranty bought when the vehicle was new might have covered it for $300 or $400 a year. Most owners skip that option because the vehicle feels invincible in year 3. By year 6, that decision usually looks like the expensive one. Every line item in this video traces back to the same 5-year mark, the same point where the manufacturer's name comes off the repair invoice and yours goes on. Repairs aren't even the full story, and this is the part most buyers never factor in at all. Insurance companies price in all this hardware too. Comprehensive coverage on a heavily equipped crossover often runs higher than on a simpler one, because a cracked windshield now means recalibrating a camera instead of just swapping glass. Stack a parts shortage on top of that, the kind that leaves a vehicle sitting in a service bay for 2 or 3 weeks instead of 2 or 3 days. And a courtesy loaner turns into a rental bill running $30 to $50 a day once the dealership's program runs out. None of that shows up in a payment calculator. All of it shows up on a credit card statement a few weeks later. None of that's a repair bill. It's the cost of owning the technology. Labor costs compound the problem in a way most owners never see coming. Independent shops increasingly can't touch this work at all. Calibrating a forward camera or reflashing a steering module usually needs the same factory software the dealership uses, so the cheaper option down the street quietly disappears the moment one of these systems is involved. An independent shop might run $130 to $150 an hour. The dealership the calibration software requires can run $180 to $220 for work that used to be a Saturday morning job for any decent mechanic. Add up the calibration fees, the insurance gap, the rental days, and the labor rate difference over one ordinary year, and those quiet costs alone often total another full car payment. There's just no loan attached to it. It comes straight out of checking, the same place the grocery money lives. When it's finally time to sell or trade in, a vehicle with a major repair in its service history doesn't appraise like one without it, even if it now runs perfectly. A buyer who spots a transmission or steering replacement on a vehicle history report will often negotiate $2,000 or $3,000 off an offer that already accounted for normal wear simply because it raises questions about what else might be next. That hit to resale value is real money. It just gets collected later, right when the owner is trying to walk away. A nicer driving experience came stapled to a pricier ownership bill, and the timing of that bill isn't random. Watch how those two numbers move against each other instead of taking it on faith. In year 2, a typical compact SUV might still lose $3,000 or $4,000 in value, while the odds of a major repair sit close to zero because everything's still covered. By year 6, that same vehicle might only lose $1,500 or $2,000 a year, but the odds of a transmission, turbo, or sensor failure have climbed enough that the expected repair cost is closing in on that same number. Once those two lines sit that close, the old advice about paid-off cars being automatically cheaper quietly stops being true, even though the vehicle looks identical from the driveway. Here's how this actually shows up for a real owner, not a hypothetical one. Someone driving a 2021 compact SUV finally pays it off and feels genuinely good about it, because for years, that was the right call. A few months later, they schedule what they think is a routine visit, an oil change, maybe a tire rotation, nothing that sounds dramatic on the calendar. Their phone buzzes around lunchtime. It's the dealership. The service advisor walks through what showed up during inspection, something in the CVT, or the steering rack, or the module behind the dash camera, then reads off the number, $3,500. The owner just stares at that figure on the screen for a second before it actually sinks in. That's roughly 10 months of what a new vehicle payment would have cost, or close to what a lot of households manage to set aside for emergencies in a full year, gone in one afternoon on a vehicle that already belongs to the owner outright. The car they own outright just billed them like they didn't. The vehicle didn't stop losing value while that estimate was being written up either. It's worth less today than it was yesterday, repair or no repair, which means that $3,500 lands directly on top of a depreciation bill that never paused for anyone. Most owners never notice this moment. They just notice the bill. None of this means every SUV is a disaster waiting to happen. Plenty of owners go years past the warranty cliff without a single major issue. And that's not luck so much as one possible outcome among several. Take two neighbors with the same SUV, same year, same trim. One drives it 4 more years and spends almost nothing beyond routine maintenance. The other eats a turbo replacement in year 6 and a steering rack in year 8. From the outside, they made the identical decision. Same decision, different bill. Financially, they landed in completely different places, and neither one could have known in advance which side of that outcome they'd land on. That's why this has to be treated as a risk calculation, not a character trait, the way it usually gets framed. It was never about being the kind of person who takes care of a car. It's about understanding what you're exposed to either way. Even when you do everything right, the owners who come out ahead aren't the ones who guessed correctly. They're the ones who priced in both outcomes before deciding to keep driving, instead of finding out which neighbor they were the hard way. A paid-off car isn't free, it's just unbilled. A simple framework holds up better than guessing. Add up what you'd reasonably expect to spend on repairs this year, factoring in the kind of vehicle and the mileage it's carrying, plus how much it's still realistically losing in value over that same year. When that combined number starts approaching, or passing, what it would cost to move into a newer vehicle still covered under warranty, that's the signal to take a serious look at selling. Not when the car feels old, not at some round mileage number people repeat in comment sections. When the math itself crosses. That crossing point is more specific, in dollars, than most owners expect. Run real numbers through it, and the framework stops feeling abstract. A 6-year-old crossover carrying around $2,000 in expected annual repair risk, plus another $2,500 in expected depreciation, costs close to $4,500 a year just to keep on something that's already paid off. A new crossover payment, fully covered bumper-to-bumper under warranty, can land in that same neighborhood. Two completely different vehicles, almost the same annual price tag. At that point, the warranty isn't a luxury feature. It's the cheaper insurance policy, sitting on a vehicle the owner hasn't bought yet. That only works if you're tracking the right number to begin with. A monthly payment hides almost everything that matters. It smooths a $35,000 purchase into something small enough to feel painless, and says nothing about what's being lost in value or risked in repairs. A small number every month hides a big number every year. Annual ownership cost is the number that matters because it forces depreciation, repairs, insurance, and labor into the same picture instead of letting one small monthly figure hide all four. This was never an argument for trading in a perfectly good vehicle every few years to chase something newer. It's not about buying another car at all. It's about recognizing the exact moment an asset quietly turns into a liability, simply because the loan happened to be paid off first. The biggest mistake most owners make was never buying the wrong SUV. It's keeping the right one long after the math stopped working in their favor, and never running the numbers to find out exactly when that happened. At what mileage did your last car start bleeding your wallet dry?